Welcome back, guys, to the Beyond The Playbook podcast. And we are right now we have a return guest, by the way, Mr. Gavin Price, who was so kind to, you know, give us a few more minutes of his time for the second time. Like he couldn't be rid of us enough, we had to pester him a little bit for the second time as well. But yeah, so we have our first returned guest on our podcast. So I think that's a milestone of itself. So
Yeah.
he's here with us to review the Wales episode for our previous series for the women's Euros. So welcome back, Gavin. How are you doing? And we have a lot of life updates as well as we are in different places.
For sure. All good. As you know, I'm in Canberra in Australia. I've just relocated over here. So thank you for juggling the time zones and being patient with me trying to connect via the internet today. Really appreciate it. And I'm honored to be the first returning guest. Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, let's get to it. So I mean, our first standard question which we ask to all our guests is, where were you when your particular country secured qualification? So in this case, Wales. Where were you when Wales secured qualification to their first major international tournament ever? Like they would be debuting at the Euros
No,
this
no,
year.
no worries. It's good to start on a really positive question. I remember it vividly. Wales qualified through a playoff against Republic of Ireland with a 3-2 aggregate win. They drew in the first game and won the second game 2-1 away. Has it dropped out, guys? Or hello? Don't know whether the audio's dropped out. Hmm.
No, you can go ahead. You can.
You can go
You
ahead.
can go ahead. Okay, no worries. Yeah, Wales won a historic second leg game to win the tie 3-2 away in Republic of Ireland. It was it was a big release for the nation, particularly the women's and national footballing community. There'd been a number of near misses over the years where Wales had nearly qualified, and even just at the most recent World Cup, 2023 World Cup, there was playoff heartbreak where they lost against Switzerland in extra time. So it kind of exercised a few ghosts of the past. And, as you know, if you win in a playoff, it's sort of ecstasy. But if you lose in a playoff, it's quite a dark place for players and the fans. But most people in Wales were particularly happy for some of the legends of the women's game. So people like Jess Fishlock and Sophie Ingle, who are multiple champions, have won various trophies from around the world. Somebody like Jess Fishlock at Seattle Reigns, coming towards the end of her career in her 40s, still playing for Seattle at a very high level. But I mean, she's won everything that you can possibly win in the women's game: Champions Leagues, titles in Germany, Holland, Australia, and other places. Was most valuable player in the National Women's Soccer League. So it would have been a travesty if somebody of that pedigree in the game never got to play on the biggest stage at a major tournament. So people were just super excited about that. But yes, I watched the game in my local pub, the Tredegar Arms in Newport, and, it was really exciting. And if I think about maybe 15, 20 years ago, you probably wouldn't have got quite a crowd of people into the pub for such a game. But now people are really engaged with women's football and they were really excited. So yeah, it was a fantastic time. So onwards to the finals.
Yeah, I think for someone like Jess Fishlock too, I think she is nearing the end of her career. So to be able to go out with a bang with her national team at a major tournament is I think a good way. And I really hope for her sake and for her legacy's sake that Wales have a really good tournament.
Thank you. That's very kind, Sai. I mean, Jess is incredible. I mean, she has something like 100, close to 170 caps. But there are other players that have played many games. I mentioned Sophie Ingle earlier. I mean, she's won the Women's Super League a number of times and Women's FA Cup in England. Top quality player. Again, about 140 odd caps. But there are others, and these guys have been with the Welsh football women's programme from a very young age. So they've seen the darker days where the facilities weren't quite as good, where they didn't have necessary access to the top coaches. They didn't have the media exposure. So for those guys to go on that journey is fantastic and very exciting. I'm very happy for them.
Yeah. I mean, like I think even Sophie Ingle, she just recovered from ACL tear, and she's like, I mean, like she's showing a lot of commitment coming back for at her age, especially to recover from her ACL tear would be really difficult. And the fact that she is doing so, just to represent Wales at their first ever uh, major tournament, it kudos to her. Like and they. I think I saw a couple of training videos of her recently, and she looked pretty spry. For a person who just suffered a ACL tear. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I guess the sort of medical treatment and the physios and the sports science is getting much better. But I mean, the footage of the players at the end of the game when they qualified versus Ireland, they were very keen to bring Sophie into the fold. She was commentating as a pundit for BBC Wales on the day, but the players grabbed her and brought her into the celebrations because she has been captain of the team for many years. She's passed on that baton now, but she's pivotal to the Wales course and an amazing servant to not just Welsh football but football in the UK and globally. So yeah, it's really excited for Sophie, and fingers crossed she's okay for the first game. I saw that footage also, and she does look like she's got good range of movement and has a great chance of playing. So that's really cool.
Yeah, you mentioned that you saw, compared to what you would have seen a few years ago, you've seen a lot more growing interest in women's football in Wales, particularly with a lot more people catching the qualifiers and all that. So, how do you think once the tournament starts off and once Wales starts playing the big games, how do you think this will shape the off-field legacy for women's football in Wales?
So I mean, the women's Euros isn't just a football tournament, as you guys will be fully aware. It's now one of the biggest events, in international sport. I'm sure it would rank, I suspect, with TV audiences into the summer in the top 10. It will be one of the biggest events, certainly during 2025. So it's in Wales, and I think in Europe and globally, it's seen as a platform for societal change. It elevates the visibility of women athletes, boost investment in the game, deepens community pride, especially within sort of fan bases where there are girls looking to get into football or younger women looking to transition into the sport. It's that thing of, if you need to see it to be it. So having the Welsh players and the other players for the other nations on that world stage, peak prime time, biggest football tournament this summer is super exciting. One thing I think Wales has done very well in the last decade or more is whenever they've qualified for a major tournament, so predominantly the men, so the last World Cup in Qatar, but also they've qualified for a couple of Euros in recent times, they've always filtered a lot of funding back into grassroots sports and infrastructure. So I know there are grand plans to do this with the money that the Football Association of Wales will make from the Women's Euros. And of course, it's all about accessibility, access to opportunity, and Wales across Wales. So not just in the bigger towns and cities, but also in regional rural areas. So we can get young girls playing. I think it was a really interesting interview with Rhian Wilkinson, who is the national team coach for Wales. She's Canadian, but she does have strong Welsh diaspora roots. When she was a young girl, around 8 years old, her family relocated to the Vale of Glamorgan near Cambridge in South Wales. I think her mum is actually, I think she's actually Welsh, her mum, but she was born in Canada, largely grew up there, but they relocated there at 8 years old. But Rhian was talking to the media yesterday, so ITV and BBC in Wales, and she told the story about when she went to Wales as an 8-year-old, and she'd been playing football and other sports in Canada, openly. There was competitions there were clubs. She went to school. There was no girls' football team in the school. There was no pathway for young girls who wanted to play football or other sports. I mean, the sports were, I guess, segregated, so girls could play maybe hockey or netball, and the boys were playing, football, rugby, cricket, and so on. So Rhian made that point that what this tournament can really do is elevate, I guess, Welsh football and accessibility for girls and young women on the world stage, and hopefully open doors. promote more competitions, promote more school teams, open those doors so people have the opportunity to play. Football Association Wales has a mantra, football for all. So, this is key to their strategic direction moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think it's so nice to hear, the way, such stories which are being told, about not lesser nations, but nations which are not, as renowned in in typical footballing culture and the footballing world as well. And you see these stories. That's the beauty about these tournaments. When you see these nations, making their debuts, and the fans when they get involved, it's like beautiful to see. Like, I mean, we recorded and we did release an episode about Poland recently, and we got to know because that was their first ever major tournament uh, debut.
It's huge. It
It's
is
huge.
huge. It's huge for the nation, particularly women's football, but it's huge for the nation. And one thing I'm liking about the way Wales is travelling at the moment in general is, we talk about Wales or Cymru as we call Wales in the Welsh language, and we do tend to refer to the national teams, the Cymru men's national team or the Cymru women's national team, but we see them as one entity. They all play for Wales and have the same status. In my mind, Jess Fishlock is Wales's greatest ever goal scorer above Gareth Bale. I mean, she's done it on the world stage. So I think that kind of messaging and parity and equity is really important. And we've seen a lot of movement in things like equal pay for the women's national team and the support. I mean, people involved in the women's game will talk about the dark old days where the women's team really just had to battle to exist with the Football Association, and they were often given hand-me-down old kit from men's teams, and the tops were ill fitting. They were too big. They were often in tatters. And, you're supposed to be representing your nation. So for that to transition now, where they've got access to elite equipment, fitted shirts which are designed for women's and girls football, the same sports science access. To stadiums, I think it's really important that you've seen the national team playing at the Liberty Stadium in Swansea, or even the racecourse in Wrexham, and of course Cardiff City Stadium, where Wales tend to play most of their games. It's no longer just a male-only space; it's seen as a national stadium for both the men and women, and I think that's something that's really, really significant and very important.
Like, I mean, as you said, there is a lot of national pride. I mean, especially in Wales, especially about the Welsh language, right? Like the way there's a lot of pride about. So I just want to ask about S4C. I think that is the particular broadcaster. They've
Yes.
made it. Yeah, they've made a consistent effort, or they've made a commitment to, produce free-to-air Welsh language sports. So how do you think such a initiative will change commercial as well as the cultural landscape of women's football in Wales?
Yeah, it's a great question. So S4C, it's S4C in the Welsh language. It's the only TV channel that's exclusively in the Welsh language. Securing free-to-air Welsh language broadcasts of the women's and men's Welsh national football teams is super important. It makes the games accessible to everybody, regardless of location or income, and it champions the Welsh language and identity at the same time. So it's a free-to-air channel. You don't need a subscription of any kind. So that's really, really important. I mentioned you've got to see it to be it. So if you've got all the women's games televised live, they're on primetime TV in stadiums. It's becoming normalized for younger generations. So there are kids, boys and girls growing up, and it's just normal to see their heroes, men or women, playing on the world stage. Free to air on S4C. I think commercially it does build audience loyalty for the Football Association of Wales. It does help drive merchandise and ticketing. And I think S4C are very creative with their social media shorts, their videos. They do a lot of stuff in bite-sized Welsh and English, which allows people who may not be first language Welsh speakers, both within Wales and outside of Wales, or people have never heard of Welsh, to connect, with the sport through the language, which is kind of really cool. And it's also, I guess, inherently linked with Welsh government's Welsh language strategy, looking to get 1 million Welsh speakers within the foreseeable future. So, through Football Association of Wales, you can actually learn to speak Welsh through football. So through coaching and training and using, the Welsh language in sport. Those programs are linked in, and they do a lot of work with people like S4C around that, and other civil society actors in Wales. There's S4C has quite a cool program called Iaith Daith, and it basically translates sort of to, I guess, Welsh on the road. And what it is it's a somebody famous, or somebody from the world of sport or culture or TV will be taken on a road trip around various places in Wales, but the person who drives them will be a native Welsh speaker, and they'll help them learn Welsh, but they'll take them to cultural sites from their childhood and background. So they'll build in the journey to the learning process. So Chris Coleman, who famously coached Wales to the semi-finals of the men's Euro 2016, he went through that process. Jess Fishlock has gone through that process. She went on a road trip with somebody called Catrin Heledd. Catrin Heledd is a prominent women's TV presenter in the sports field in Wales, so she often commentates on and interviews on Wales football games in both Welsh and English. So Jess went on a road trip around Wales with Catrin and began to learn Welsh. But it's become quite a cool and cult program, and I know it's built up quite a following outside of Wales because it's kind of a bit of fun. So, as well as the serious side of culture, language, and so on, they often set them like cool tasks that they'll learn to cook something in Welsh at a local restaurant, or Chris Coleman, for example, played in a Welsh language band because he's a bit of a keen guitarist. So I kind of digress a bit, but the Welsh language is really, really important to Wales, and it's certainly really, really important to Football Association of Wales, Welsh football. Certainly, if you go to a Welsh national football men's or women's game, you'll hear a lot more naturally spoken Welsh than you would at other sports. And part of the reason for that is we do have a lot of fans from North Wales, as well as South Wales, and North Wales has the Welsh-speaking heartlands along with the southwest of the country. So I guess it's all part of kind of nation building, culture building through sport, if you like.
Yeah, I think like what you say, right? Having that cultural impact in terms of language, right? Like a lot of people in most places around the world have this misconception, right? If you're all people from the British Isles speak English, rather they all speak English in different accents, and they may not be aware of like Wales having like a proper Welsh language, or the Irish having the Celtic Gaelic language, or even Scotland. I'm not sure whether they have a local dialect, but I'm pretty sure they might
They
have.
do. They do. There's Scottish Gaelic and different dialects in different parts of
Yeah.
Scotland for sure, and certainly in some of the outer islands and things like that. So, but it's really interesting because even within the UK, you will probably find some people in some parts of even England that don't realise that there are towns and villages in some parts of Wales where it is the predominant first language. So people are, going about their daily lives at school or shopping in Welsh. It is a natural language. It is a national language. So, and the other thing I'll say about it is the misconception that it's a minority language, and in some ways that's actually not true. I think there are kind of measures on what's a minority language, but they're about, on different measures, at least 500,000 Welsh speakers, but some measures say they're around 750,000. So it's not as niche and small as people realise. And when you think the population of the country is only around probably about 3.2 million, give or take. That's quite a significant chunk of the population. So anyway, I digress again, but it's really, as I mentioned earlier, it's really integrated with how we see wider sports culture and how we champion Wales on the world stage.
Are there any initiatives that the Welsh government is currently undertaking to use the Women's Euros as a platform to promote Welsh heritage and values globally?
Yes. So the Welsh government has announced what's called a partnership fund of £1 million. It's basically invited what we call Team Wales organisations to bid for various projects from that £1 million pool. And there's also a steering group that's been formed of, I guess, civil society actors in Wales that will help guide all projects linked to this. So they include people like S4C, Sport Wales, which is like the arm's length governance body for sport, government body in Wales, Museums Wales, the British Council in Wales, Welsh Arts International, and of course the sports federations like Football Association of Wales, and many, many others. So there's what we call this Team Wales or Team Cymru approach to sports diplomacy, which is designed to be a whole of nation thing, where we leverage from all levels of society, from grassroots up to professional levels, diplomatic levels, government levels. So they're embracing the spirit of that means that's on the Welsh crest of the football team, and it roughly translates to playing together, working together, which is where the famous slogan that came out to Wales during the Euro 2016, "Together Stronger," came from. So it's all about, everybody has a role to play in this. But there are multiple things happening and under this strategy. So you will see art installations and music installations on the ground in Switzerland, which will promote Wales and engage with the Swiss local community, but also fans from the other nations who are heading to Switzerland for the games. You will see. Previously, the last World Cup in Qatar, you had things like match watch parties in places like Washington, where there were formal events where dignitaries from Wales met with US dignitaries, but there were also nightclub takeovers where you had Welsh DJs, US bands, US DJs, all congregating around, I guess, wrapped around the US and Wales fixture at the last Men's World Cup. So I'm going off piste a little bit, but the point is the Welsh Government will have an integrated programme of activities linking in with all these civil society partners, playing different roles throughout the whole tournament. Of course, you're going to see some of the more formal stuff where, Welsh government diplomats and senior officials link in with Swiss officials and some of the officials of the other teams who are playing in the group. And by the way, that group D Wales is in is probably the strongest group in the tournament. I mean, Wales is up against three European powerhouses, right? In obviously our neighbours in England, European champions, France, and the Netherlands. So it's going to be a tough ask. And I've got actually something coming out on my Substack site around this, probably in the next few days. But I think it's going to be a little bit of a kind of test tube or the laboratory for football diplomacy, as well as top quality action on the field, because all of those nations have quite diverse sports diplomacy approaches. But I do think, and this is not me speaking too proudly about my home nation, but I do think the Welsh approach is probably the most diversified in the actors that it brings on board. So it's really interesting that a small nation could probably, there's probably a few lessons or tips that it can pass on to some of its competitors. That's not to say there's not some amazing things happening in France, Netherlands, and England. There definitely is. I'm happy to talk about them, but I think the way the Welsh government is really, really integrating everything, and it realizes that it doesn't own football, it doesn't own sport. It's more of a conduit to make things happen. So the fund is there. Another sort of program it'll fund is this program called Llysiau Cymru, and that means Voices of Wales. But basically, what that is are a suite of cultural ambassadors that will be on the ground again in Switzerland. So we've used things like Bryn Williams, a celebrity chef. We've used Colin Jackson, who's a world champion hurdler, used to hold the world record in 110 meters hurdles, and numerous other cultural diplomats on the ground, and all of them will to some extent do some engagement in Welsh and around Welsh. Welsh government officials will always open proceedings in Welsh, and then they'll switch to either English or try to switch to the language of their hosts. So it's always putting the language on the world stage that we are a bit different. We do have our own language, and we like to see it as part of our kind of, I guess, focus differentiation or strategic value proposition, that we are a bit different. And I do think that's where small nations have a bit of an advantage over bigger ones, because they can focus on these cultural elements. I think I mentioned last time we spoke, Welsh government could be, maybe either a bit cheeky or maybe a bit more strategic. We're less worried about nuclear proliferation or I don't know, sort of the negotiations of international trade, because that's largely devolved at the UK level. We can focus on all these really nice, positive things like language, music, culture, history, landscapes, and use them to our advantage. I'm not sure if I answered your question directly there, but I hope it gave you a flavour of what you're after.
Yeah, you've covered one question, another question, like the same tells.
No worries.
So
No
it's
worries.
definitely you definitely worked a lot, and I think
Yeah.
that point which you right, like with nuclear proliferation, and we can see what is going on in world events, and we don't want to make it more. We don't want to talk about those events more, but you can see what is going on in the Middle East, and in general, it's been going on
Sure.
for the past 3 years. And
Yeah, absolutely. And sorry, go on, Ash. Go on.
yeah, no, yeah, just kind of we'll have.
Yeah. No, I was just going to make the point that obviously these things are important to Wales and Welsh people and the Welsh government. Like, for example, Wales is a designated nation of sanctuary for refugees, but the point is we're not always at the cut and thrust of the coal face of those difficult negotiations around these really difficult aspects of international engagement and relations. I think we'd like to be, but sometimes it's an advantage not to be, is the point I'm trying to make, I guess. And I think one last point I do want to make while we're on this question is, though, whilst the £1 million pound partnership fund is fantastic, I welcome it. It's brilliant for sport in Wales, for women's sport. It is not as much as the close to 2 million that the same partnership fund went to the men's game during the last World Cup. So, not only in Wales, but globally, there is this disparity of funding. So it is really important to make that point that, yes, we're doing some good stuff in Wales, but, there's still a way to go, when it comes to funding equity and parity, if you like.
I mean, topically speaking, we are just, I think, 6 or so hours from the Los Angeles Lakers getting sold for $10 billion. So we can see the
Wow.
disparity of funding there itself. Like, so it's like crazy, that how, we consider certain amounts to be big amounts, but then when you see events happening in other parts of the world, you just staggered by it. Definitely.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, the Los Angeles Lakers story is incredible. I mean, that just crazy money, right?
Yeah. 10 billion. 10 billion.
Wow.
Big money. Yeah.
Big money.
So, yeah. So we just wanted to know, like, if you could share like a unique story, or an example of a particular venue or city in Wales which has been transformed by hosting like major footballing events. I think you did mention about the Millennium Stadium, Liberty Stadium, as well as the Wrexham Stadium. I'm sorry, I don't know what the name of the Wrexham Stadium is, but yeah, I think even with the
Sure.
rejuvenation of Wrexham as well. That's helped a lot, I guess.
So, there's an interesting history of sport in stadia as it relates to Welsh national football and rugby teams. I'll go sort of a bit more regional first, but then I'll make the point about the national capital of Cardiff and the stadiums there. I do think that I'm sure you guys are familiar, and a lot of our viewers are familiar with the Welcome to Wrexham story and Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney, and what they've done to Wrexham. And as you're probably aware, they're going to be playing in the second tier of English football in the Championship next year, which is a really, really big deal for North Wales and for the whole of Wales and Welsh football. But what we're seeing there is a real regeneration of the racecourse ground, or what's known as the Kairas in Welsh. It's now up to a standard where Wales can play international football games there. It hasn't hosted a formal qualifier in the modern era. It did way back when, but it's been quite a few decades since it hosted a proper qualifier or a Nations League game. But it has hosted a couple of friendlies. But I can see the impact that's having on Wrexham, along with Wrexham Football Club. That story, it's really the stadium and the feel-good factor around it is really acting as a hub for regeneration in Wrexham in general. And people are visiting Wrexham who would have been unlikely visitors back at the time. So you're getting people from places like your country, India, or United States, Canada, and they're not just going to Anfield or Old Trafford. They want to go and have a look at Wrexham and the racecourse. I mean, that's unimaginable even probably 10 years ago. So I think that's a great example, and it will be really, really important for Wales to have, I think, a second national stadium or a viable stadium for international qualifiers in North Wales. As I mentioned earlier, we have a lot of fans in the North Wales area, and the infrastructure in Wales is tricky. So you've got pretty good infrastructure down the south and on the north coast, but through the middle, it takes quite a long time to cross what is quite a small country. So it can take them maybe by rail 4.5, 5 hours if they're lucky. So to come down from North Wales and watch a qualifying match on a work night or a school night on a Tuesday night or any weekday is really difficult for them. But they still come in their thousands, and they often don't get home until the early hours of the morning, or they have to pay for an expensive hotel and take a day off work. So I think it's really important on multi levels. But I'll come back to Cardiff. So in recent times, the men's and the women's team tend to play most of their games at the Cardiff City Stadium, which is the ground that belongs to Cardiff City Football Club. The vast majority, I'd say probably 98% of Welsh football fans will see that stadium as the home ground. So on match day, it is transformed from being a Cardiff City Stadium, and it has a lot of Welsh national regalia and images of the players, and the lighting is more fitting for the national team, and it's become a bit of a fortress. We've not lost many games there, but what I will say is that more generally, sport, not just football, certainly rugby union as well. Cardiff has become, it's punched above its weight. It's become a host of choice for many major events. So the Millennium Stadium, as you mentioned, is called the Principality Stadium now in the centre of Cardiff, is the national stadium of Wales. It's more of a rugby stadium. The football team has played there from time to time. And they will actually play games there in Euro 2028. So that stadium is Wales's host stadium for Euro 2028. But that stadium is right slap bang in the middle of Cardiff. So you can basically fall out of your seat and be in any number of, scores of bars, pubs, cafes. And there aren't that many stadiums in the world that have that now, because they tend to be built on brownfield sites on the edge of the city or out the way. So it's really helped Cardiff's economy. So on match day, it's just a festival atmosphere. All the main streets in the city are closed. It's jam packed with people, and it's really, really attracted people from outside of Wales, from across the UK, but across Europe and the world to come to games, and it really has been an incredible asset. And that stadium, as I think I mentioned, is hosted a Champions League final, it's hosted Rugby World Cup finals. When Wales play rugby on Six Nations games, I mean, again, it's a huge cultural festival, difficult to get tickets. All the bars, have things like live music and people just happy in the streets. So if you've never been on a major to a major sporting occasion in Wales, in Cardiff, I'd encourage you to come along. And if I'm not on the other side of the world, I'll try and look after you. But it's pivotal to the economy, is the point.
Yeah, I mean, it is super cool to hear about the history of each of these stadia and how there is like this disparity between North and South Wales, which, even though despite Wales being a pretty small country as well. I think I'm deviating a bit from the questions we had sent you. So I don't think many people are aware. There is a local Welsh Premier League, or it's called Cymru Premier, right? Where you have the local leagues, New South,
Yes. Yeah.
the recent thing. And there's a very cool team name which I love, by the way, Connors K Nomads.
Connors
I
Key
think if I'm getting it
Nomads. Yes, in North Wales.
pretty cool
Yeah,
name.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is there a
they've been
women's
to.
equivalent for this particular league?
So it is our premier league and competition in Wales. Most of the standards has improved incredibly in the last 10 or 15 years. The vast majority of the teams in that system and the league below are fully professional, or if they're not, they're at a high level of semi-professional football. If the winners of that competition and the Welsh Cup, and depending on coefficient rankings on performance in Europe, those teams will qualify for UEFA competitions. So recently, one of the teams got into the league stage of the Conference League, and that's a really, really big deal, because the finance that comes with just getting to that stage, and they play teams like Fiorentina, who are obviously a huge club in Florence in Italy, with a huge history. So it's incredible stuff. So the league is definitely going well. It's on the rise, but we have this tricky situation in Wales, which in some ways is really, really cool and what I grew up with, but in some ways it does hold that league back. That the top 4 clubs in Wales do play in the English Football League structure, and have done throughout their history. So we talked about Wrexham, Swansea City, Cardiff City, and my home city club, Newport County. They're all in the English Football League, and that means that the National League is arguably weakened, although probably between, this is a controversial thing to say, and I don't say this lightly because I am a passionate Newport County fan, but probably the gap between maybe the Cymru Premier and Newport County in England's League Two is probably not that big anymore. I think League Two is probably still the higher level, but it's not a huge gulf. And Newport, for example, have signed a couple of players in recent times from Cymru Premier clubs that have gone on to they played for Newport, done really well, and they've gone on to sign for other clubs. So there was a guy called Will Evans, who was a farmer from Mid Wales. We signed him from the Cymru Premier. He did really well for us, including scoring against Manchester United in the FA Cup, where we gave them a bit of a fright till late in the game, and we sold him on for good money. So there was a period where there were tensions between those two structures, but now I think Welsh football is more unified. We're working together, and I think that's part of the success of the national team as well. We're trying to take a one nation approach, and I think we've achieved it. So in Newport now you have this facility the FN of Wales built called Dragon Park, and there's another facility in North Wales called Colliers Park, not too far from Wrexham. And again, they were built off the back of success. The money came from success at, getting to World Cups, getting to European Championships. But these facilities now tend to be integrated with the teams in the English Football League structure, and you'll see in the sharing of resources, coaches, people traversing between the different systems, people doing coaching badges at these facilities, and then they might end up becoming Premier, they might end up at Newport County or Swansea or whatever. So it's complex and it's not easy to understand, and sometimes it's easy ammunition from somebody from another UEFA nation to say, well, you shouldn't really have your own national team. Your main club's play in England. Why do you have one? We have to deal with these kind of things, and that's an ongoing tension. But the history of that is those four teams that play in England way back when, they were actually invited at the early stages of the English structure to come into the English leagues, because they knew at the time that games between Welsh and English clubs had a bit more of a sort of an edge, a competitive edge, a bit more rivalry. So if they came into the league, then there's a bit more excitement. And that was a long time ago, and it's just stayed that way ever since. So there you are. There's a quick and dirty history of Welsh football and Welsh football clubs, but there's a lot more history and things in between. We can maybe have a beer one day and have a chat about it.
Moving on to the World Cup aspect, now that Wales is qualified for their first ever major tournament, which is the Women's Euros, and given FIFA's decision to expand the Women's World Cup as well to 48 teams from the 2031 edition, from the perspective of Wales, a country yet to qualify for its major World Cup, Women's World Cup, what is your opinion on this move?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I think overall, on balance, I'm in favour of it. I mean, at the end of the day, for a nation like Wales, this creates real opportunity. I mean, we're already tracking well up the rankings. I mean, we're a fair shout to qualify for more tournaments moving forward, for sure, even within the current system. But it does send out a signal, I think, to young female footballers in Wales that qualification is certainly no longer a dream. It's achievable. You could easily be playing in the World Cup, particularly after it expands. I think from a more global lens, it encourages the development of emerging football nations. We saw the impact that it had on, I think, Morocco, and I think it was Philippines qualified for the 2023 Women's World Cup. I mean, that would be transformative for their countries, women's football in those countries and their football association, the funding that filters through and the exposure. It's you've got to see it to be it. So I think, yeah, it's a good thing overall. You're going to get more funding, more visibility, a richer competitive landscape, and rising tides lift all boats. So I think if the smaller teams, so to speak, are playing high level of competition against some of the bigger nations, they're going to improve. And yeah, we've seen this in men's football, as you guys will know well. There are very, very few easy games, if any, in men's football. I mean, even very small teams in confederations now have great coaching staff, great tacticians, sports science. You look at somebody like maybe Liechtenstein, who Wales men played recently. I mean, it wasn't that long ago where they were often getting heavily beaten, but now you very rarely see them beaten by more than one or two goals, and they do get the odd drawn result, and they're rapidly improving. And that's because I think they're fitter, stronger, more organised. I think you can really do a lot now if you've got a team of 11 full-time professionals. Even if they're playing at the lower levels, you can really make it difficult for some of the bigger nations. So I think we'll see some of that eventually filter through to the women's game. It's probably already happening to some extent. So yeah, I think it's a great thing. It's probably inevitable. There is the argument that does it devalue the tournament overall if you have so many teams qualifying. So maybe for some of the bigger teams, it's almost hard not to qualify in these circumstances. But it's supposed to be a World Cup. I guess it'll be interesting how they structure and frame it. And if you end up having too many games and too many group games, do people get lost in, do they start missing games? Whereas a lot of football fans now, they'll, when there's a big tournament on like a World Cup, they'll watch pretty much every game if they can, or at least the highlights, right? So, yeah, it'll be interesting. But yeah, I think it's a good thing overall.
Yeah, especially I think from the Welsh context, they're the only UK team left to qualify for a World Cup, and if they do qualify for the 2031 World Cup, the immediate next edition is the 2035 one, where they will be part of the hosting setup, right? So I think that is almost like a good jump to boost the women's game in
Exactly.
Wales. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one of the really impressive things that the Welsh Football Association has done is, again, as a small nation. But by the way, never ever, if you ever meet the men's national team boss, Craig Bellamy, don't refer to Wales as a small nation, because he'll probably back at you, but he'll laugh about it as well. But he's and I know my good friend and ex Wales captain and now on the vice president on the UEFA Executive, Professor Laura McAllister. She also thinks the same, that we shouldn't be calling ourselves a small nation. We've got to think big. We've got to compete. And somebody like Laura will refer to maybe somebody like Croatia, who has a similar sized population, but has got to semi-finals and finals of major tournaments and produced incredible teams. And this is a really young nation that's has only had sovereignty over the last couple of decades, right? So it's that what is a small nation, and how do we see ourselves? So yeah, Craig Bellamy's he's implementing all these interesting things, and he wants that filtered through to the whole Wales system. Young girls, young boys, men's, women, that winning mentality, that we can do this, and as you mentioned, Si, it's about, that sort of programming and progressing moving forward. We have a coach education program in Wales, which is second to none in the world. I mean, you've had people like Mikel Arteta, Patrick Vieira, Roberto Martinez, Thierry Henry, these kind of like, Rolls-Royce players that have gone through the system, but also from the women's game. We've had Brandy Chastain in town, and I think she's coming back for a conference soon. So those pathways are really, really there for young girls and young boys, and we're seeing a lot of progress at age grade and youth grade. We're seeing some of our teams qualify for the what they call the elite level of finals. So they're almost like mini Euros for the youth grades. We're doing quite well, and we're competing well. So I think that the future is bright, and it's not outlandish to think that. Certainly, the men have done it before, but the women's team could go quite deep in tournaments into the future. We want to be where we want to compete. We're not just there to make up the numbers. I think it will be, and I know this is kind of your last question, I think, but we might as well cover it now. How do I think Wales women will do? Well, we're in that difficult Group D with England, Netherlands, and France. I think that it's going to be really tough for us, but we are capable of getting a result against all of those teams. We would need to be on our A game, but we are regularly pushing some of the bigger teams, and we've had a few narrow defeats to teams like France and England in the not too distant future. All of our players now are playing at a very high level, either in England. We've got a sway the players in the US, and Rhiannon Roberts is at Real Betis in Spain. So they have nothing to fear. So I think that those three teams will be a little bit worried about us, because they're going to be expected to win, and we're going to be a banana skin for them, and they know we're rapidly improving. So I'm not saying we're going to get out of the group, but I don't think it's out of the question. There's always a surprise team in the tournament, and I think we have a very good chance of doing that. And I think we will, one of those teams will at least hold one of those teams to a draw or beat one of them. And, it might be that we cause them not to qualify, one of those big teams, So we shall see. We're not, we certainly don't fear them. And I know some people, I know somebody like Jess Fishlock certainly won't fear them. She'll be champing at the bits, uh, the games don't come much bigger than that. And of course, playing your near neighbour, England, if we could get the scalp, we would love the bragging rights. But it's, to be honest, it's not about that. It's about progression. So let's see how we go. But I'm gonna predict we'll get at least one win. Put it that way.
So I have a hot take. I feel that England could get group staged. I have the vibes out of the cap is little iffy, to say the least. I have a feeling, and also I have personal animosity towards England. Let's just say that across all levels, I don't support England in any major tournament, so there is that as well. And yeah, I also think that Wales could have like a 2016 esque run, like how the men's team did in 2016, the men's Euros in France. But I think that was a 2014 tournament, it's a 16 team tournament, so it's a little more tougher. But who knows?
Exactly, yes. It is tougher. It is tougher, but I think if you start well, you get a good result, and I think we've got the Netherlands in the opening game. I think that's right. We do, yes, we do. July the 5th. Then anything's possible, and that's what happened at Euro 2016. I mean, you get the win against Slovakia. Probably didn't play that well on the day, but we had a superstar like a Gareth Bale that scores a free kick. We get over the line, and then you suddenly got belief. And any tournament's like, if you get 3 points on the board, you're looking at the group thinking, if we draw one game, we'll probably qualify for the knockout stage. So it's about that. So I think the first game is going to be huge, and it's going to be huge for all the nations. If we get something out of that, then I think we can be dangerous. If we get well beaten, which is of course is quite possible, we're playing top teams, then it's going to be a difficult 3 games. But you've got to be in it to win it, and it's all about experience, progress, and as you say, we've got nothing to lose. And if we can do another Euro 2016, then I'll buy you a few beers. Ash, if your prediction comes true, no problem.
I will. I'd be chuffed if that were the case. I'll be happy for you also personally if that were to happen. Because even there were a lot of parallels because even England were in Wales' group in 2016, so there is that as well. And I'm manifesting. Let's go for it. Let's go for Wales. Wales to the round of 16. Quarterfinals.
Why not? And I think it's good for football when different nations do stuff. I think the women's game could do with a little bit of a not a shake-up, but it would be good to see some more emerging nations go deeper in tournaments. We saw a distinct improvement at the World Cup in Australia and New Zealand. Definitely, certainly the big guns didn't find it as easy as they did maybe 2 or 3 tournaments ago. You look at the US, who had a few scares in that tournament. So I think, it's anything is possible, right? It's sport, 11 against 11. As I mentioned earlier, we've got a strong squad and a good mix of really experienced players and some exciting youngsters coming through. So, let's go for it.
Yeah, even the run of games you're facing Netherlands first, then France, and you're facing England as well. So I think even the way it's been scheduled also could work out in your favor, because pressure can do funny stuff to a lot of teams, and then if you start well, I'm telling you, I think Wales could be the surprise team of
I think so, and I think the playoff win away in Dublin will do them a lot of good, because I think a lot of people thought that after Republic of Ireland went to Cardiff and got a 1-1 draw, and Ireland were, I think off the top of my head, they were ranked about 10th in the world. So a lot of people were thinking, well, it's in Ireland. There's going to be a passionate big home crowd. It's going to be difficult for Wales. So to go there and get a win 2-1 in a playoff game and win the tie 3-2 and get to the tournament, it shows them, the players, what's possible. It gives you belief, right? So hopefully they can take that into the tournament. And I do think sometimes qualifying from a playoff gives you more impetus than if you'd done it the traditional route, because it just seems like an exciting bonus. It's like winning a cup final, right? So you often see teams have a bit of a bounce, in domestic football, say in, team in, like, say, England's League Two gets promoted through the playoff, and they might only sneak into the playoffs, but they just get momentum and they do quite well the next season. So I'm hoping we get a bit of that. But maybe maybe it's just wishful thinking and I'm away in the stars. Maybe I'm breathing too much Australian air and getting carried away. I don't know.
I mean,
I think
no, I don't think so, but I think it's cool to. I mean, that's the thing beauty about sports, right? Like, even when you are a fan of a smaller team, you will always expect your team to do the impossible. And I okay, I don't want to say small team Wales are a big nation. Sorry, Craig Dudley. Like,
it's fine. It's okay.
yeah.
It's fine. No,
So
look, we are a small nation, but I think it's about thinking big and not. I think Craig's point is not about using that as an excuse. It's not an excuse, right?
exactly.
Because there are plenty of other small nations doing wonderful things in the world, and
I
you've only got to look in global business and commerce. I think something like top 10 of the most wealthy countries are small ones. So small is beautiful sometimes. So let's see.
yeah, I think we can end. Sai, you have anything to add? You want to say anything?
No, no, I think we've covered pretty much everything.
That's great, guys. Well, I'm sorry if I went off piste a bit, which maybe mixed up some of your questions, but hopefully it's not too hard to slice and dice it a bit and come up with something that's of interest to people. I started watching the Polish episode, and that came across really well. I only got about 10 minutes into it, but it's fantastic. So I will finish off that maybe on the way home now, actually. So well
Thanks
done on that.
for this episode itself. So we can just put this in. We're going to keep it. Yeah. So I
I will
think
do.
let's just conclude by saying thanks very much for coming on for a second time. It's an honor to have you for giving us, almost an hour of your time, an hour and a half
No,
of.
it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure, guys. I think what you're doing is fantastic. I think the series is coming across really well. You've got some great guests. So onwards and upwards. It's a privilege. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah,
We,
let's so over on to
we'll,
the next episode whenever we
we
meet again.
will exactly. We can talk again. I'm sure. So
Yeah.
just drop me a line
Yeah.
anytime.
So
All right.
guys, please like and
Okay.
subscribe and comment in the video below. And yeah,